And then hopefully others can join us as they're able to jump on. So, okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to our conversation on bolstering small and medium enterprise cybersecurity and Canada's National CyberSecure program. I am Nicole Shepherd. I'm the Manager of Policy and Partnerships with the Regina Chamber. Quick reminder, if you haven't already, please put your microphone on mute for the duration of our conversation this morning, with the exception of our presenters, obviously. We want to be able to hear you. I would also like to just acknowledge a couple of our Regina Chamber board members that are with us this morning. Mr. Colin Poular, Board Chair. Morning, Colin. And Mr. Jason Dittman, who is with us this morning as well. Welcome to you both. I also want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors for this morning's event, TD Bank, TC Energy, Midgard, Buckingham Security, Bromwich and Smith, and Creative Options of Regina. And we also have Custom Outdoor Accents and Days in Regina, our door prize sponsors this morning. So stick around to the end and you'll get a chance to win a prize. So thank you very much to all of our sponsors for your continued support. Because of you, we're able to continue to hold these events and share really valuable information to our business community. So we are pleased to have with us 4 speakers this morning, who I have the pleasure of introducing to you now. First up, we have with us Nigel Russell. Nigel is a regional advisor for CyberSecure Canada and analyst for ISED's Strategic Innovation and Policy sector, where he tracks key economic files in the prairies to help inform federal policy-making processes in Western Canada. Previously, he worked for the Public Health Agency of Canada as an analyst in corporate performance and strategic planning, and at the Conference Board of Canada as a research associate and economist. Nigel specializes in impact-based policymaking and holds a master's in public policy and administration from Carleton University. Welcome, Nigel. We also have with us Nadia Lombardi. She is the partnership manager for the CyberSecure Canada program, responsible for program promotion, operations, and strategic partnerships. She has over 20 years experience in developing and maintaining working relationships while advancing government initiatives, leading program delivery and strategic planning. Nadia holds a master's in public administration from Carleton University and resides in Ottawa, Ontario. Thanks for joining us, Nadia. Erle Higgins is the technical manager for CyberSecure Canada. He holds a master's of applied science in electrical engineering from Dalhousie University with over 20 years of government experience. He has led various projects on IT development, business development, strategic planning, and project delivery. In his current role, he is leading and helping guide, assist Canada's small and medium business sector to improve their cybersecurity awareness and posture. Morning, Erle. And last, but certainly not least, Doug Blakey. He is the president and founder of Watsec Cyber Risk Management. Watsec is a cybersecurity auditor and accredited certification body for the National CyberSecure Canada certification program. Small and medium enterprises gravitate to this program because it's a practical way to show stakeholders that effective due diligence has been taken to safeguard corporate digital assets. Prior to founding Watsec, Mr. Blakey spent more than 25 years in the IT industry working for organizations including IBM, Prudential Assurance, and Environment Canada. During his tenure with IBM Canada, he supported Fortune 500 companies from business sectors that included banking, insurance, and public utilities. He holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics with a double major in computer science and psychology from the University of Waterloo. And he resides in Waterloo, Ontario with his lovely wife, Claudia. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
And really quickly, before I turn it over to our presenters, I just want to mention, if you do have any questions this morning, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, Nigel, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Nicole. And I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the Regina Chamber for having us on today to talk about cybersecurity, CyberSecure Canada, and the value that small businesses can get from this program, right? So I'm just going to share my screen here so I can jump into our presentation. Bear with me just for a second here. So I think you should all be able to see it now. And here we go. Okay, can I get a thumbs up from Nicole or Doug? I can see you guys on my screen. Okay, perfect. So I think we're good to go.
We can see it.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, so here are a few objectives of our presentation here with CyberSecure Canada. So 3 of the goals that we really want to relay and communicate to everybody on the line today is learning about the importance of cybersecurity at a foundational level, 2, understanding CyberSecure Canada, and 3, the certification process that's a core function of CyberSecure Canada. Doug's going to speak a little bit more to the lived experiences of businesses that have gone through the certification process as well, to see what kind of value that they've seen in focusing more on their cybersecurity from a strategic lens. So this slide kind of looks at 2 different things, right? So from our perspective, why are we looking at SMEs and SMOs as the government of Canada, but also why are hackers looking at SMEs, right? So as many of you know, SMEs make up the majority of businesses in Canada. 98% of Canadian organizations are SMEs, right? So that's why we're targeting our efforts on bolstering cybersecurity in this space. And then because of that as well, hackers are increasingly targeting SMEs and SMOs, right? And they're increasing their sophistication of their cyber attacks and cyber threats. So I'm going to jump into 3 main reasons, or 3 of the primary reasons why SMEs and SMOs are targeted in Canada. And I'll just disclaim and preface this information with, we're not trying to scare anybody. We're not trying to create any fear around, cybersecurity, right? It's more just creating that foundational set of knowledge to give you the information, to give you the facts, to be aware of, right? So the first reason, and this one's pretty obvious, right, is just SMEs, your business, you store valuable information, right? You have credit cards on file, you have personal information on file. So from a hacker perspective, or from somebody who wants to infiltrate your business, there's so much value in infiltrating your systems, right? A second big reason here is that your business always belongs to a larger value chain and supply chain, right? So if they gain access to your business, they're also tapping into your network, your distribution, and your value chain, right? So focusing on cybersecurity isn't just about protecting your business against cyber attacks. It's about protecting your larger network, your distribution, right? And a third reason is that SMEs are often less geared and equipped to deal with cyber attacks, right? So 70% of data breaches in Canada are SME related, right? And many employees working for SMEs and SMOs may not have that expertise, even if they're in IT and IM, they may not have those cybersecurity skill sets to prevent a cyber attack should it occur, right? So these are the top 3 reasons why SMEs are increasingly being targeted through cyber attacks, right? So just top of mind information. So here we're just kind of summarizing the 3 main threats, right? So cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated, they're becoming more frequent, and they're becoming increasingly harmful, right? And this information isn't to scare, it's just foundational knowledge on cybersecurity. And it's good to know that it's increasing, right? And the pandemic has really shown that, yes, it's helped, digitize business, but with that, we've seen an increase in attacks against SMEs as they've shifted their focus to online business, right? So here are just a few stats that I quickly want to highlight, right? So 71% of cyber attacks occur in organizations with less than 100 employees. 82% of Canadian organizations reported an increase in overall attack volume. And the big stat on this slide is that the average attack costs $50,000 in recovery fees, right? So it's not a small incident. And it shows that cybersecurity is a long-term strategic investment, right? It's not, if it happens, it happens. it can lead to pretty consequential financial decision making, right? So it is very top of mind. So one solution, and that's why we're here to talk about CyberSecurity Canada, or it's my apologies, CyberSecure Canada, is federal support in this space, right? So as the government of Canada, we recognize the importance of cybersecurity within the SME ecosystem to address supply chain concerns, investors, customers, and international partners. So with all that said, I won't take up too much more time, and I will pass it over to my colleague Nadia, who will speak more to the program itself. So over to you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I noticed that there was a question in the chat. So SMO stands for small and medium-sized organizations. And we define that here at the federal government from having 1 employee up to 499 employees. And that includes both the for-profit and the not-for-profit. So I hope that kind of helps to give a little bit of context. But to give a little bit of additional context to what Nigel has presented, which is basically the landscape of, why your sector is really important in this, is that we the federal government heard a few years back when Public Safety Canada was doing some consultation on cybersecurity, that this sector has been a bit neglected. In the sense, a lot of the focus has been more on the larger sectors and the larger enterprises, and somehow given how much you contribute to GDP, given how many people are employed by small, medium-sized businesses, something has to be done to help you. So here we come in. We are a certification program, and we target the small, medium-sized sector. We are voluntary by nature. So certification right now is not mandatory, it is not a regulation, it is not a policy. And as I just mentioned now, we do tie in directly to the National Action Plan, the National Strategy for Canada on Cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So what we have basically tried to do here is create a program that is going to help small, medium-sized businesses improve their security baseline, have a better posture, be more prepared for a possible attack. We're also looking just to educate about why cybersecurity is important, and I will get into a little bit more details on some initiatives we have underway over that in a bit. And ultimately, we're trying to increase consumer confidence as all of us start to purchase more in the digital economy, do more and more things online, and give consumers confidence to say that when you are working with a specific entity, your data, your transactions, your interaction will be secure and protected. Next slide, please. So in doing this, our program is basically trying to do a couple of things. We want to be cost effective in the certification. We don't want it to be too onerous and too burdensome on businesses. And also we want it to be somewhat easy. And I'm going to put easy in air quotes because we are talking about cybersecurity. There are some technical things that do need to be done to protect your business operations. But we have tried to find a balance and trying to help those that are not technical by nature. Next slide, please. So in doing this program, 3 departments have come together. And I know that most people kind of paint one brush when you're thinking about the federal government, but we have sort of distinct roles. So Nigel, Erle, and myself, we're part of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. So we have the lead on putting this program together, promoting it, establishing it. We have also worked with 2 of our other federal family partners, and that is the Standards Council of Canada. They have a lead role on this one in bringing on board the individuals like Doug from Watsec, who are certification bodies. They will have the role as being the third party who will do the assessment to ensure that you have implemented all the certification requirements necessary to be successful. And they're also leading some work on doing a standard development. We are looking to develop a standard in this area for cybersecurity to help the small and medium-sized sector. We then have the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. They are basically our technical authority. And their contribution to this really has been to come up with the 13 controls, the certification requirements that one needs to adhere to in order to meet the certification. Next slide, please. So what does the process look like? Next slide, please. We try to make this as simple as possible. We do try here at the federal family. So first and foremost, you have to implement the requirements. From that, we have on our website a portal from which you will enroll in. You'll be able to do a bit of a readiness test to get a sense of, are you really ready for certification? You will be able to select the certification body you would like to work with. This will be the entity that will do a desktop audit to make a determination you've implemented the controls. And then that to and fro kind of happens. They will give you some feedback. Doug will speak more to this as part of his presentation. Ultimately, you will be successful. Certification is valid for 2 years right now, and then will be the time to recertify. Next slide, please. So these are our requirements for our program. We have 13, and as I like to sort of speak to them a little bit, is that they are a mix of what I call technical requirements and also administrative requirements. So the technical ones are many things that many of us know to do. Make sure you have automatic patching, ensure that your website is secure. If you're working with outsourced cloud providers, making sure that what they are doing, how they are holding your data also meets certain standards, backing up your data. But then we have some administrative ones that really require planning and thinking. It's more of an investment of a business owner's time. And that is ensuring you have a cyber incident response plan written out and drafted. So if an attack or an event does happen, you kind of know what to do, how best to mitigate it, who your key contact folks are. And likewise, things like train your employees, have password policies. So these are sort of what I tend to kind of bucket them in as administrative things because they require just more reflection and time. Next slide, please. So in terms of, who is on board to have the role of the accredited certification body, we have Doug with us here from Watsec. And we also have 3 other entities that are available. They are Bulletproof Solutions, Cybersecurity Canada, and SourceTech IT. We are growing this list, and we hope to have additional bodies on board in the near future. Next slide, please. This is the million-dollar question we always get. What does it cost to get certified? And the honest answer is that it does depend. It does depend because it will depend on the sophistication, the size of your organization, the number of digital assets that you have in place, how your network operates, if you're just in one location, if you have a series of locations. And so all of these factors get taken into account, and then with the certification body, they will make the appropriate determination. We have found on average that the certification fee usually hovers around $2,000. That tends to be the average price. Next slide, please. So here is what the certification mark will look like. A successful organization will obtain this. It is valid for 2 years. We encourage them, to use it as part of their branding. We really do believe that in adhering and pursuing this certification, we are going to allow businesses to, one, ultimately improve their cybersecurity posture. And with that, as Nigel had mentioned, if an attack does happen, you won't be the victim of having to, spend a lot of money to recover from it. We also do believe, as part of doing consumer confidence, it will also help with brand recognition. It sometimes tends to be really difficult to quantify when an organization is attacked, what that does to your brand and your reputation, and the trust that you may have with your consumers and your suppliers. Next slide, please. So some things that we are kind of working on behind the scenes right now is we are developing e-learning tools. So for each of our certification requirements, we are creating a module that will help anyone who is interested to understand why this particular requirement is important, what you would need to do to demonstrate compliance for a certification body. So we're averaging the modules not to be more than an hour in length. They kind of vary. Some are shorter, some are longer. We're trying to keep them as interactive as possible, and we hope to have them basically live by the end of summer, early fall. Next slide, please. And as I had mentioned previously, we're also working right now in developing a standard in this subject area. So the program, once the standard is adopted, will pivot to the standard as in terms of what you have to measure against. The standard actually was open for consultation. It closed just on April 1st. I can share with you that the standard is really adhering to the 13 controls. So there isn't going to be a large variation going forward. And right now, really where the team is that they're collecting all the feedback they heard about it and trying to compile it and determine it and analyze it, and then incorporate that into what will possibly be the draft one for consideration. Next slide, please. So I'm kind of at the end of my part of the presentation, whereby it was to introduce to you the program, the voluntary certification program, give you a bit of an insight in terms of its process. But now I would really like to turn the floor over to Doug. He will really be able to give you the experience of what successful clients have gone through and how they have seen the value add for this certification. So over to you, Doug.
All righty. Thank you, Nadia. I'm just going to fire this up, and then I'm going to put on my screen share. We know this works. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes, looks good, Doug.
Good. I like the thumbs up. That's great. And I am going to show one other thing. There are just 8 slides here. It's mostly, I'm just going to go over a few key aspects of the program from our perspective as an auditor, and just share those with you, insights and whatnot, what we're learning about the program as we grow. And we have a number, more than a dozen organizations that are actually in process of getting their application ready to submit for certification. So there's a lot of, we're finding more and more growing interest in the program. So let's just go over here. And by the way, ask questions as we go, I guess via the chat, but if I see questions, I'm happy to answer them. Prerequisites for applicants before submitting a certification request. And this is something that's interesting to know and have a sense of in terms of where you're going and what you need to have a good sense about. And one is about understanding basic cyber risk management principles. What we're doing here is, what we're talking about is not trying to come up with a technical solution that is a be-all and end-all and we have the best firewall, etc. We're trying to look at the grander picture. So it's important to understand that you're trying to manage cyber risk rather than apply lots and lots of technical measures to address it. And the reason why I say that is because cyber risk involves the people as well as the processes they follow, in addition to the technology that they use. So it's a mistake if you think that, oh, cyber, it's technology, I'm going to delegate that to the IT guys. That's a big mistake, because really the way that every organization, from a single person on up, anyone who's connected to the internet, quite frankly, should think about this is it's a lot more than technical aspects to it. It's about managing the risk, and how do you manage the risk, whether you're personal or you're a small business, whatever. You start to think about, well, what are the things that could go wrong, and what should I do to make sure that my company is going to continue to be viable the next day. And so understanding basic principles is really an important concept to keep in mind. You also need to have someone that's going to be able to manage your certification project. So this is tends to be a project lead, someone that can say, okay, we have to do this, so we're going to take and talk to this part of the organization. We need to do this other thing. We don't have the expertise in-house, so we'll find someone that can help us, and things like that. So it's someone that is the point person that works with someone that's helping you become certified, preparing your certification. A third thing, an important prerequisite, is having knowledge of Canada's baseline security controls. I think they've been mentioned earlier. Nadia has talked about them. I'm going to pull something over here on the screen, and I'm hoping that this will show. Now, can you see this on top of the other? Can you see the new document?
Yes. Yeah, we can see that.
Excellent. This is the document that we're starting with, the baseline controls. And for the most part, it is the even the new document that we're going to have as we go from the pilot program to the actual production program for all of this, which is very close to happening. Things have not changed drastically, and I really like to point this document out so that everybody can have a good sense as to where we're going and the reason behind all of this. So so when an auditor is looking at an application for certification, really it's based on the different principles that are in this document. It's a short document, it's a public document, and I highly recommend that everyone take a look at it. It's an interesting read, and you can probably go over it pretty quickly. You won't necessarily understand it all, but you'll have a pretty good idea as to what the sorts of things are that you need to keep in mind. And I'm going to scroll down here. I really like paragraph 4 in the introductory section. And in particular, and this is not going to be an eye test, so I'm going to blow this up a little bit larger. Let's see how good we are. Let me know when your eyes come into focus here. Hopefully that's good. So scrolling down here, and I really like this notion. We, which is the Communication Security Establishment, part of the federal government, have established this baseline set of controls for small, medium organizations such as yourselves. And they say that we believe organizations can reduce the threats.
I got a thing here starting, so I'll let you go, but we'll chat via text. I'm sure. So
okay, alrighty. So it says, we believe that organizations can reduce cyber threats through awareness and best practices in cybersecurity and business continuity. Therefore, we believe we can successfully apply the 80-20 rule. And I think this is so important for every small organization to appreciate. In other words, we're going to get 80% of the benefit of protecting ourselves for 20% of the effort. And that more or less is very true. We're looking at the sweet spot here of the things that you need to do. And the other thing that I really like about this document is it gives you something to shoot for rather than thinking, this is impossible. The small companies think we don't have a lot of resources. We're not sure how to address all this. Don't go thinking that way. Don't go thinking you need to have expensive technical expertise either. What you really need are people who can ask the right questions, and a lot of the right questions are given to you right here. And then you can manage that risk by reviewing them. The other thing I was going to point out from this document, I'm just going to go back a little bit. And Nadia mentioned 13 control areas. These are all mentioned here in the table on page 2. And this is a great way of looking at it. There are 13 critical areas that we're looking at. Develop an incident response plan. You need to know what to do when something goes wrong. You can't be figuring that out after the fact when you're under duress. You need to have that plan beforehand. And this is a brilliant thing to have first out of these 13. This is so important. Think it through. Automatically patch systems and applications. You're probably aware of that. Enable security software. Certain things are options with various things that you're doing. But make sure that you're implementing the appropriate security. Don't try to bypass the security or you're asking for trouble. Securely configure devices, use strong authentication, training for employees. This next one, backup and encrypt data. That should be number 1 or 2 as well in my mind, because when all else fails, you must know that you're going to be able to restore to live another day. There are too many organizations, especially smaller ones, who get hit, and they get mired in trying to figure out what to do, and it just knocks them right out of the water completely because they find that their backups are not what they thought they were, or maybe the backups have been contaminated. That's not a good situation to be in. So make certain that not only do you have a backup that has certain aspects that are in the cloud or somewhere else, but that you've restored and tested your restores of your backups. If you're relying on backups that somebody else says is there, well, you don't want to figure out when you really need them whether they really are there and they're backing up what you think they are. So if you do nothing else, take a look at 3.1 and 3.7 on this document and make sure that you're addressing those and that you have a good start on all this. So it talks about some other things, mobility, portable media, websites, etc. These are all basic things that you really need to consider. Last thing I'm going to point out here before I go further is I'm going to go right to the bottom and I'm going to show you those 13 control areas are listed here on about 2 pages in the annex right at the end of this 20-page document. And if you scroll beyond these OCs, which are organizational controls, are just sort of defining the scope of what you want to test with respect to a certification. Let's go up to baseline control number 1, control area 1. That's the one I just talked about. This goes from 1 to 13 right here. And this is drilling down now. These 3 controls are part of the first control area about having a plan. Basically, we call this an incident response plan, an IRP. And you want to have that, you want to think it through, and it says if an organization is unable to manage some types of incidents on its own, have a plan for what it'll do. And then it talks about a written incident response plan that details who's responsible for handling what, so that if some incident happens, let's say one of your users sees a suspicious email, then they're thinking, oh, there could be some problem here. Somebody's trying to break in. Well, where does that person go? Who do they tell? And what does that person then tell? And then how do you do that? So this is the sort of thing that you want to have thought through beforehand. So I won't get into all the details of these. There's a total of 42 of them. But if you go right to the bottom, if you're able to go through and be able to state these, then you will be in a great position to become CyberSecure Canada certified. Any questions before I jump back into the presentation? Okay. All right. And this is freely available, so you can find that on the web. And if you do nothing else, even if you don't get CyberSecure Canada certified, I strongly recommend that you read this document and just be aware of the things that you should be thinking about to protect your organization. Okay, and the last thing that I have here, an understanding of the CyberSecure Canada certification program as well. It's definitely an achievable model, and it was aimed specifically at small, medium enterprises. So every organization should be able to achieve this certification program. Some are more complex than others and maybe take longer to become prepared and certified. But I will say there's an advantage for the smallest organizations because you're nimble and you can actually do certain things pretty quickly and put in place a very strong backbone, if you will, of security by design before your company starts to really grow and become even larger. It becomes harder the larger you are to start implementing some of these very basic things. Okay. Couple of key points that I'd like to point out. One is practitioner versus auditor. A practitioner is someone who understands all of these things and can help you prepare your submission for audit, for certification. So the practitioner will understand the baseline controls that we talked about. The practitioner will understand technology. The practitioner will understand about establishing documentation and creating policies for your organization. But that person then steps back and then hands things over to the auditor, and then the auditor reviews the submission that the company has done. So the application basically for cybersecure certification. So there's a strong synergy between the two, but there's an arm's length relationship between the two. So you can't have the auditor that actually does the practitioner work and then audits their own work. So some companies what they do is bring in a practitioner to help them, or they send someone on a bit of training so they understand the basics, and then they can then hand things over to the auditor. This is important, and I've mentioned this earlier, so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it again. When you're looking at this, think people, process, technology, PPT. It's an important mantra that we hear quite a bit in the technology side of things. You have to look at the three in concert. You don't think that technology is the solution to all your woes. Because really your firewall is your people. It's what your people do with your digital assets and how they approach things. So it's not solely a technical problem. And I guess that's the key point. And then what I'm doing now is I'm drilling down a little bit more into the various stages for certification. We've broken it into 3 stages. The first is understanding your deficiencies, where your gaps are. So in other words, where you are today, where you need to be tomorrow for this certification program, and then how to go from A to B. And so we've broken that into 3 stages: understanding the gap analysis, then doing a pre-certification review preparations. In other words, addressing the gaps that you have, and then completing the application on our portal. And then that's stage 2. And then the third stage is the actual audit review by our auditors here at Watsec. And then the fourth point to mention here is an understanding, make sure again, your understanding of CyberSecure Canada certification program. I guess I'm repeating myself there, but it really doesn't hurt to do that. In other words, understanding where you need to go and why. Understand why you want to go and address this for your organization. A little more detail about the 3 stages so that you start to get a sense as to how there's quite a bit of rigor to what we're doing here. And by the way, this is not a one and done thing. This is something that you want to maintain. Once you've been through it the first time, you're there, almost there. You've really learned a lot. The smallest organizations, for example, tend to think what managed service providers in the past have called the break fix model. If it's not broken, don't fix it. That's so outdated now, and you don't want to do that. You want to establish an ongoing program, keeping security in mind, of the things to do to become secure and to remain secure within reason. So think more along the lines of managing the risk. Remember earlier I mentioned that, and that's so important. Certification stage 1, a little more detail. I mentioned earlier a project manager. You want to have someone that's on the nut within your organization that can think about governance, risk, and compliance. So governance of the organization, you're going to do that as you grow one way or another. Think about the risks you face from a cyber perspective, and then think about the compliance requirements you have, including, I think, PIPEDA, and I think any privacy legislation that we have nationally and or provincially within Saskatchewan, for example. Review and understand the document that I mentioned earlier, and there are other documents that supplement that, but it is very well defined now. Establish the scope. Do you have multiple locations? Do you have multiple business units? How much do you want to tackle in terms of certification? Then you establish an agreement with the certification body. Nadia mentioned 3 others, so there's 4 of us at this point. Have them gain their assistance, and in fact, you'll gain some knowledge. You now have another organization and more people to reach out to for assistance. Then we give you access to the portal, and you start completing and preparing for stage 2, and that is stage 2 basically. Internally, you'll want to do a gap analysis. Where do you stand versus where you need to be for this document that I showed you? And there are services available if you need them that will help you understand what those gaps are, so you get an independent review of where you currently stand, and that can be extremely valuable. Then you want to implement those gaps, potentially having the practitioner's assistance, and now you're prepared to actually review and establish, do your preparations as you work back and forth between the applicant, your organization, and your practitioner. Maybe you have someone who is looking after it internally, or maybe you've brought in an independent third party that understands CyberSecure Canada and can help you implement it. Either way, you can move forward, and now you're ready to go through stage 2, preparing. So what you want to do is you complete, remember I mentioned earlier that document, the organizational controls. Those first 8 controls they're not graded by the auditor, but the auditor looks at them to make sure that they are complete and that you have reasonable answers. So in other words, you're starting to think these things through, because basically you're defining your organization to the certification body. And then there are the remaining 42 baseline controls in those 13 control areas. You start to complete those, and you can put them, work on the first one. If it was me and I was doing this and we were a green company, I'd start with baseline control 1, control area 1, and then I'd go to control area 7, and then go back. Make sure you have those 2 in hand. And a point to make that's very important, that the auditors are always looking for proof that you're doing things, and that means you need to have solid documentation. And what we find, among all other things, smaller organizations don't necessarily have their policies written down, or their policies and the processes that they follow, procedures, etc., fully documented properly. So not only do you want to establish the rules of the road, your policies, but then you want to make sure that you're implementing controls to make sure that the folks that work for your organization follow the rules. And that will do a lot to strengthen your organization from a risk management point of view. And then you submit your request via the portal to potentially Watsec. What happens is we now have a little bit of back and forth. So this isn't like you're submitting something and you're going to pass or fail. We're going to work with you a little bit more. So you've already gone through these things a few times, but there is a bit of complexity here. So what we do is the auditor, actually the program manager within Watsec, will take a look at your submission and look for completeness. And do a 15-minute scan. And if it turns out that there's some obvious shortcomings, they won't even start the process. They'll send it back to you and say, you know what, you're missing these kinds of things. You really need to look into it deeper. And in fact, you might even ask for some assistance. There are reasonably priced partners of ours and others that can help you. We all want you to understand what you need to do and then to accomplish those. So we do that first scan, and then we get into the actual review. So we assign a certification auditor in the organization. That lead auditor will actually do not 1, but 2 reviews. They'll do a complete review, and they'll look at, they're going to look at all of the requirements to pass your 42 control statements. And they'll look at, have all those requirements been met? And so they do a complete pass. It generally takes 3, 4, 5 hours to do that. And then they'll note what is working and what is not. And then they'll send it back to the client asking for additional information, asking for some more proof, some more supporting documentation. We just want a little bit more clarity. We're not going to blindly certify you. And then, of course, if we did that, then your certification doesn't really mean much. And just think of it as another way of having an independent review of what you should be doing. And it's high value in going through the certification process like this. So the certification will go through your application. We'll mark certain things as completed. The ones that aren't, maybe you have a half a dozen things that are short, we want more proof. Send it back to you. You provide the proof, and then hopefully you're ready for certification. You're just about there. The last step is we have what we call a technical reviewer, and that person is a different person within Watsec, and that what they do is they look at everything that you've done, everything that you've submitted, so you're getting another independent view of what you're doing and looking it over, and then what happens is they'll say, okay, yeah, we're good with all of this. The lead auditor has done their job, but there is one or two technical questions that I have. So they'll ask you again just a little further clarification. You finish that, you send it back. They look at it. The technical reviewer looks at it, says, "Well, we've got everything good to go." Then 3 people within Watsec huddle. The program manager, the lead auditor, and the technical reviewer. Make sure that we've followed all of the processes that we're supposed to from an accreditation body perspective, because the Standards Council of Canada is who we as a certification body report to. Make sure that all of that fits. We've followed the rules. We've done this impartially. And we can now send a note to Nadia and her team that, yeah, we've granted certification. You can now use the different marks showing that you've been certified, and you can show your stakeholders. It's something to actually, quite frankly, be proud of, and it will definitely set you above and beyond your peer competitors, because you really do look after private information. You're looking properly after any of these other things that you should be doing. Maybe you're trying to get investment in your business, then you've done the right things to show an investor that, hey, we're looking after ourselves, and the investors say, wow, this is a great program, and it is. So we do that. I've talked about the clarification as necessary. Then we award a pass-fail. And by the way, I wouldn't even call it a fail. Basically, what we're doing is we're going to send it back to you and say, you do have significant shortcomings here. You need to address these. Come back in 3 or 6 months, reapply, and we will go through this again. And then you'll get there. A couple of additional concepts that I wanted to mention here. I'll go through these quickly. If nothing else, you really need to know what assets that you have. What are your digital assets? So you want to establish scope, not only scope, but have this, what we call an asset register, or something that notes that you know what should be on the inside of your network. Not what is there, but what should be there. Because if there's something there that shouldn't be there, you know something's wrong, and maybe there's something lurking inside that you didn't know about. So an important concept is understanding what your digital assets are. Then there are 2 other key risk assessment concepts. It's a thought process that executives and others need to go through in terms of thinking about what I need to protect and how important is it to protect. Do you keep your information? How confidential does it need to be? How important is it that it doesn't get changed on it, for like your bank account number or your bank account information, whatever? And is the information available? So from a technical point of view, a security point of view, if you do not manage confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your information, then you're not doing a secure job. And then the way that you do your risk assessments is you think, what is the likelihood of something happening, and what would the impact be to my organization? If you can look at those 2, then you've gone a long way to really helping you figure out what's important and what's not. And the last thing that I'll mention is information security policy. Again, your business rules, have business rules written down, established policies, and then put in some controls, maybe some checklists that are followed when somebody does something. Are you following certain standards such as CSC? And you're doing all the right things. So these are basic concepts that will really help you. Okay, so I guess I've gone through this already in greater detail, so I don't need to spend a lot of time here. This is important, though. You get up to 30 days of back and forth correspondence with the auditor. This is the way Watsec does it. Others may do it differently. So we generate reports. If there's a fail, we will let you know what the deficiencies are, so you'll know what to correct. And that's pretty well it. I'm going to put this up really quickly. There's 3 things here. These are 3 things that we, Watsec, as a certification body, are allowed to do, and we do. And a very important one is this education program that we have. And we've actually combined that now, 1 and 3 as a single component. We're making sure that everybody gets the education. We've actually had in the past, I guess the program's a year and a half old now, we've had a couple that have taken almost a year to go through it. They've gone through and taken their time. We need to make sure that they're moving through forward properly and they're not struggling. And so that's why we're making the education mandatory, and we're just simply bundling it in as part of our certification program.
Doug, my apologies. Sorry, could I cut in really quick? I'm just looking at the time now, and it looks like we have 6 minutes left. So I was wondering if we had any questions from the chamber, or if anybody in the chat had any questions for us, just so that we have an opportunity to address anything that's been asked to us directly today. And I have a question for you, Doug, just about the lived experience of businesses that have gone through the certification process.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen from that? Like, what did they learn through getting the certification? And now that they're certified, what have they heard from their clients, their customers, their partners in their value chains?
Okay, good questions. What organizations are learning is they're not nearly as well secure as they thought they were. That I can't underscore that enough. And a big part of what they're learning also is that they're not documenting things. Things are documented in people's heads. And so if somebody's not available and your incident response plan is in somebody's head, the CEO's head or something, doesn't help. You're in trouble there. So that's an important takeaway. The second question in terms of what people are hearing, well, first of all, becoming certified is a great confidence builder for organizations. I've literally heard CEOs, in fact, I had one yesterday, talk about sleeping at night. And we reviewed with them a number of things, and they were, once they become certified, they realize that they know that they can restore if all things fall apart. They understand a process for addressing risk. They realize that it's a lot more than just the technology. I hope that answers your questions.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And I see, Erle, you have your hand up. Go for it.
Thanks, Nigel. I saw a couple questions in the chat, so I'll just put my hand up so I can jump in to answer those. The first question was about, do we foresee industry associations requiring this certification program or others? And I'm adding the others in myself. And the first one I'm going to point out to is, while this program is a voluntary cyber certification program, it's a tool that's been put out there to industry to use. I can't foresee the future, but I do know that certain organizations are looking to mitigate cybersecurity concern in their supply chain. So they are looking for tools to do that. So this could be one of them. They can follow alternative models that would depend upon their cybersecurity needs ultimately. But there is companies and countries around the world that are starting to do those models. So For those of you who are aware, the U.S. Department of Defense is using a cyber certification maturity model to certify contractors that are coming in. That's truly a U.S. approach, but those companies in the supply chains may have knockdown effects this could be beneficial underneath that scheme or similar. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, common best practices are still common best practices. People involved in procurement or supply chain cybersecurity are just looking for assurances that things have been done, and this is one tool to demonstrate that trust.
Earl, mention the UK and what the government's requiring.
Yeah, so that's, well, I'm always hesitant to mention it because it's a UK drive, but our program is similar in concept to a United Kingdom initiative called Cyber Essentials, which was to similar. They set out a baseline set of cybersecurity requirements and made those a requirement for contracts with the government, and then they offer a certification program to show compliance against that. I do want to stress, though, that is UK, not Canada, and the Canadian government is not making it mandatory. It is a voluntary program, and these requirements aren't even being thought of being made mandatory. This is private sector.
Won't change, though. So,
exactly.
In other words, I think that's addressing that question that was asked.
Yeah.
Great.
Go ahead.
No, do you have one more comment there, Earl?
I thought there was a second question there quickly, but oh yeah, cyber insurance. Sorry, I just flipped over. Cyber insurance, absolutely. As you can see, that the baseline controls do recommend cyber insurance. I can foresee a time in the future where where certification can help mitigate or reduce cyber insurance costs. We are working or trying to work with the cyber insurance industry to kind of affect those changes. I think it's a level of maturity that the industry has to evolve out where they can start to quantify cyber risk to then put appropriate a recognition place for reductions in payments and stuff like that. So I think it's coming. I just don't know where it's at right now.
If I could add a quick comment to that, in managing risk, really what we're talking about, what we're doing here is reducing the risk. And then an important aspect of risk management is also risk transfer, and that's where cyber insurance comes in. So quite frankly, cyber insurance from Canadian large insurance companies is a very important aspect of what anyone's trying to do. So rather than trying to do everything and it costing a lot of money, what you do is you reduce it, maybe follow the 80-20 rule, and then supplement that with, if all else fails, I'm going to have help there from the insurer. So risk transfer.
Exactly. Thanks, Doug.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are at time, but as I mentioned at the beginning, we have recorded this and we will be posting it up on our website, and we'll share some contact information as well if anyone has any further questions, because I do think, it is a very important program. I think, like Nigel said, we've seen a huge shift over the last year in small and medium businesses increasing their online presence. And so this is more important than it ever was before. And I think that will increase going forward. So thank you very much to all of our speakers. Thanks to everyone for attending this morning. We did have a couple of quick draws. Jeanette, do we want to do those really quick before, I know we've lost some people already to other meetings, but
yeah, we can do that actually.
Okay.
I can just pick a few numbers out of the blue here and come up with some.
Let's do that.
For the days in, I have chosen Danielle. She is already logged off, but Danielle Rogers. And quick with the custom outdoor creations, I'll go with this one, and this is Sherry, and she's with Cougar Custom Cabinets. My apologies. We will mail those out to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeanette. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Some really great information shared, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Right now.
Bye. Hello.
Sorry. I'm stamping at the same time.
Oh, we're still recording too.